Well, David, I really appreciate you agreeing to do this. I know that as you told me before we started rolling, that you've been going strong since March, and you've only had 2 off days. So I appreciate you fitting us in your jam packed schedule, and agreeing to talk to me about with seemingly superfluous information about guitars and gear and stuff like that. So thank you for indulging me.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. And I still love to talk. I still like to geek out.
Yeah, well, the scope of today, and I hope that this is, tell me if there's anything on here that doesn't make sense, or that stuff that you want, that you'd rather go more into. But kind of the scope of today is I really want to talk about your your career, and kind of some of the seminal moments, the things that you really feel like kind of catapulted you as you continue to progress and get onto bigger and bigger sessions, and kind of what some of those touch tone, or kind of pivotal sessions were, that you feel like either catapulted you, or whether there was like a culmination of things that just happened where you kind of became this first call guy. I also want to talk about kind of your gear evolution, and kind of David Grissom V1 as a professional, where that started, what that rig looked like, versus kind of how you have evolved to now. I want to talk about some of your favorite pieces of gear that you rely on, and also any like sleeper pieces of gear that maybe a lot of people aren't hip to, but is like a secret weapon of yours, or something that you've relied on over the years, or even if it's just recently. And I also kind of want to talk about your approach to creating hooks, and for a lot of guitar players, I think a lot of people who are in the background, they don't understand that a lot of these songs are coming to you very bare bones, very skeleton, and you have to kind of put your part into it. And to create a guitar hook, it's not something that's necessarily that intuitive. And I've heard guys talk about where they're trying to weave in almost like kind of nursery rhyme type stuff, because they want parts that have a familiarity to people. And I've heard other guys just somehow have this thing ingrained in them to create hooks for pop music, or for whatever it is that they're doing. So I want to talk to you about what that looks like, kind of your mental approach, how you prepare for something like that, or whether it's something that you can't prepare for and it's just simply experience. So I hope I didn't overwhelm you with that, but that's kind of the scope of where I want to go today.
As long as there's not a quiz at the end, I'm fine.
It'll be true false.
All good.
All right. Well, let's start with kind of like what your first real pro job was, either as a session guy or as a sideman. What did that look like, or was it a solo, Dave Grissom solo thing? What was like kind of the first real pro thing you did?
No, I was a sideman forever. I mean, I think I made my first solo record in 07, 13 years ago.
Okay.
I played gigs in high school, and I went to college I went to Indiana University right after high school and got in a band. That band had Kenny Aronoff as the drummer. It was a bunch of guys who just had graduated from the IU School of Music, and they were all heavy cats. And I was just like, I turned 18 after my first semester of college. So to fall in with those guys and learn from them, that was really heavy. But I didn't really do that many. I did some recording around that period of time. It wasn't until I moved to Austin where I kind of got thrown into situations where I was playing with artists that were making records. And the first gig when I got here was Lucinda Williams, who at that point had only made a few small albums, but within 2 weeks of getting the gig, I'm on my way to New Orleans to play at the Jazz and Heritage Festival, and find myself at a hotel with Richard Thompson and Roy Orbison and Grandmaster Flash, hanging out in the French Quarter, eating beignets. The whole it was incredible. That was kind of like everything shifted when I got to Austin, and then I got in Luann Barton's band, and so I was able to go to Antone's every night for free, which I did. and caught all the guys that came through town, you know, Albert Collins, Jimmy Rogers, Otis Rush, just everybody that was Hubert Sumlin, everybody came through. And so in 85, I got the gig with Joe Ely, and then I started making records with him and touring. And that was a huge thing for me. It was an incredible learning experience because Joe was so generous with not only what he knew, but the space he gave me to find my voice and contribute to the songs. So I made 3 or 4 records while I was in his band with him. But that's also where I really learned the how to improvise in front of a lot of people, and like, you know, differently every night. I mean, we would sit there there was never a night where we played the same set list, and he would sit there before the gig and we'd just hang out, and I watched him just sort of take the temperature of the room and what the night felt like, and we wrote out a different set list every single night. That made a big impression on me, and I do that with my band to this day. I never know what I'm going to play until I get there, and even then I don't write a set list. I just have like 50 songs on a piece of paper, and what does it feel like? And so that whole process of kind of keeping the organic, spontaneous, in this case, just picking songs you're going to play, carried over into my soloing. And that was the period of time where I learned the value in the process of starting with an empty slate and sort of wiping the canvas, you know, an empty canvas, not having these preconceived notions about how my solo would start or where I was going to go, or the night before it was great, so I'm going to do that again. I kind of cultivated that skill working with Joe.
And this was in 1985.
Started in 85, and I worked with him until 91 when I left, early 91 when I joined Mellencamp's band.
Nice. And so you went to Indiana University to study music.
Yes.
And did you go through like a full like like bachelor's program there, or did you end up coming out early, or how did that work?
I went to be a music major and got into the music school and realized after the first year that they didn't like guitar players. Like, you know, it just wasn't a program. It wasn't like Berkeley or something like that. So I quit for 2 years and toured with that band that I was talking about with Kenny, and kind of financially had my ass handed to me. Saw what it was like, you know, what the music business really was like. And I worked at a record store for a while, and then I went back to IU and actually got a degree in finance because I was determined not to let the same stuff happen again. And I didn't know, I mean, I knew I wanted to play music, and I played in 3 different bands while I was doing this. One was like a stone cold country band with, like, you know, chicken wire VFW gigs. The other one was a surf band, and the other one was this kind of mainly cover band, but we wrote some of our own songs. It was like, did everything from like NRBQ to King Crimson mixed in with original stuff. So that incubation period helped me get a lot of skills together. And you know, the country band thing was, you know, how to deal with somebody with you know, throwing a beer bottle at you was kind of a good skill to acquire. Right. And then, you know, I plotted out, they would let you know in Indiana, like what it took to get what grade, point average. And I calculated a B average. I wanted a 3.2, and I just did the bare minimum I could do to get that 3.2. And as soon as I graduated, I got in a car and drove to Austin.
And what year was that you drove to Austin?
83.
83.
Yeah.
So what did that first rig look like when you landed in Austin and you're starting to, you know, get here? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I think I had, when I came to Austin, I had a Mesa Boogie. The 60 watt was in a Mark II,
Yep.
112 combo.
Yep. Did it have the simulclass and the graphic EQ and all that?
It had the graphic, but it was before simulclass.
Okay.
And it was, I had that, and I had my red Strat. I had I still have it. It's a 1960 Fiesta red Strat. Um, so I showed up here with that, and then I got, somehow or other, I wound up at the NAMM show. It might have been actually before I even got to Austin, and met Seymour Duncan and got one of his convertible amps. Do you remember those things where you plug the modules in? And I used that a bunch around town, and got one of those Strat Elites with the weird looking white
The
pickups.
late sensors.
Yeah, they were before lace sensor, I think. Even
Okay.
they were like, had the guitar had push buttons on it,
Yep.
and it actually served me well. I kind of got a cool tone with that rig. But then I started hanging out at this music store here, Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas Music, and there was a guy there, Danny Thorpe, who started one of the first, I think the very first Dallas guitar show with Charlie Wirtz, who knew everything about vintage guitars. I mean, this guy was like unbelievable vessel of knowledge about all these guitars and amps and everything. In very short order, he found me a vintage 50 watt Marshall and a great 412 cabinet. And I also came to the conclusion that with everyone in Austin playing Stratocasters, that I wanted to find something different. And that's when I found the PRS. So the combination of the PRS and the Marshall changed everything for me. I mean, all of a sudden I felt like I was an adult. It was been bringing a knife to a gunfight for a while, and it really changed. It really changed my whole direction sonically.
Yeah, because there really weren't. I mean, the early days of the PRS, were you using a McCarty, or what was it that you were
No,
using?
it was pre McCarty. The McCarty's another story that I was involved in, but this is the first year of '85 was their first year of being a public company, where Paul wasn't just making them on a 2-order basis. The ads started showing up in Guitar Player in '85.
Yeah.
So it was a seafoam green, which I still have it. I have it in the room somewhere. Um, all mahogany, kind of like those pickups back then were they were overwound and pretty mid-rangey. Um, but with Joe, to me, it was kind of like a Telly on steroids. They didn't have tons of bottom end, so it wasn't like you weren't swallowing up everything, but the Marshall was like, had this girth and this beautiful warmth and top. It was just it's a great combination. It still is a great combination.
Yeah. So would you say that when you really first started seeing like really big gigs coming in, was that a result of just kind of touring that you had done that was seeding new gigs for you, or was there like a turning point you felt like at some point in the 80s that like really helped kind of like catapult your career, or how do you view that progression?
Well, again, I think it was just getting in Joe's band, that because you can look at it from a material success point of view or an artistic point of view, or both.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I became a musician with Joe. Um, and we made 3 or 4 records, which people still tell me that they listen to all the time, or at the time it really changed their whole direction as a guitar player. I look back on those records and I'm really, really proud of them. And they, the memory that I have of that time period is so positive and upbeat. Um, Everything was new, and so the records I made with Joe definitely had a part in me later working in Nashville. But it was when I got the gig with Mellencamp that everything went to even different level. that was more, I mean, I was making, instead of playing for 500 people, I was playing for 20,000 people, and making records that did, instead of selling 20,000 copies, they were selling 1,000,000 copies.
Yeah.
So, just that in itself was an entirely different arena
Right.
to be in. And yeah, I mean, that was a really big thing. I mean, obviously, there's just no way you could get that kind of familiarity and name recognition,
Sure.
uh, without making a jump like that.
And at that time, was Kenny Arnoff also in Mellencamp's band in '91, or was he just playing? Because he played on some of the records for sure.
He had been in the band since our band broke up. He joined John's band almost, a year after that, maybe even sooner. I'm not sure. He was still in the band, and we've been chasing each other around. We still chase each other around in the fun sessions together. His name, I came up earlier today. I'm going to produce a song for somebody, and of course I want him to play on it. He's the king.
Right. No, he's amazing. He's amazing. So how did it work when you got the gig with John Mellencamp? Was it just like did you have to audition, or did they know that they wanted you, or how did that work?
Well, what happened was, before I joined the band, I got a call from John, his manager, saying, "Hey, John wants to go in and record a few songs." His guitar is one of his guitar players at the time, Larry Crane, who is just, I can't say enough great things about him, and he's the unsung hero of that success story. His rhythm playing and his feel and everything, it was so much a part of the biggest hits that they did. Larry he couldn't make these sessions. John, at the very last minute, wanted to cut some stuff, and would you come up and do these sessions? And I'm like, because I knew all the guys from Indiana, and I worked at a record store when I was going to school up there, and John would come in, and he knew who I was. But so I went up there and took a telly and in a PRS and a 50-watt Marshall head, and did 3 or 4 songs that were on the Big Daddy record.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was my audition, because about 6 months later, Larry left the band, and they just called me and said, "Do you want to join the band?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
do."
Yeah. And so how many years were you doing that gig for?
That was 3 years, and 3 years. And so I did the part of the Big Daddy record, and then I did 2 full records with John, Whenever We Wanted and Human Wheels.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it was longer than 3 years, but it was a solid 3 years. And that was, when people made a record every year.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But it was an incredible experience. The band was incredible. I mean, when I think of the word band, people throw that word around a lot, but this was really in the way the band was a band, or the Allman Brothers were a band. It was a rapport. It was, it was greater than the sum of its parts. And every musician in that band had the gift of their own voice.
Yeah.
And the ability to come up with memorable parts and hooks. So that was such a privilege and an honor to play with all of them. And John, he's an intense dude, no doubt about it. And there were some things about it that were like really different than I was used to experiencing in the realm of music. There's a lot of stuff that was more like being on a football team than in a band sometimes. But the main thing that I got from John was the way he worked in the studio. And he was brilliant in that regard. His approach to producing, and everything came in as a 3-chord folk song. I mean, like every song was a 3 chord folk song, and watching him and learning how he differentiated each tune and the process that we went through to get the finished product was really, really, they don't have a course at Berkeley that does that, you know what I mean? So and I was even at that point, I had this sense that, I mean, I asked questions nonstop. The engineer probably needed a fly swatter to get me back on the couch. You know, why are you using that compressor and this mic, and are you EQing that? And, you know, I mean, I was soaking all that recording stuff up at the time. So it was a really fertile period, really fun.
How much would leeway would John give you on a record? Would he, I mean, you said they're coming in as folk songs, so would he give you really specific direction on what he wanted from you, or would you just have to kind of turn out a bunch of different takes, and then he would sort of say, okay, I like take one more than take five, can you do more like you did on take two on the bridge, you know, or like how did that work typically in the recording process?
Well, the basic blueprint was that John would come in and sit us all down with, he'd have an acoustic guitar, and he would say, guys, this is the best song I've ever written, and if you all fuck it up, I'm going to kill you. That's basically how every song started. And you know, that was kind of like my first session in Nashville, my first master session in Nashville, when you listen to the song one time and I look up and everybody's out at their instruments, and I'm like, they're ready to go make the record, and I'm like, are we not, we're not listening again? It was that, so it was the same sort of like welcome to the club. But
Right.
I mean, that literally, I mean, all kidding aside, 7 out of 10 songs started that way. And what that meant was, if we had to do more than 3 takes, you've ruined the song.
Got it.
You know, if you all screw this thing up, meant if we had to do more than 3 takes. And there, you know, I look back on it and I think now, like, you know, everything is cut with a click. People, you know, they look at music like it's like, you know, that one's a little off the grid, or this one's you're a little early there, or whatever. I mean, there was none of that, you know. I mean, Pro Tools didn't exist then.
Yeah.
So much was unsaid, really.
Yeah.
And if it was wrong, you would get yelled at. I mean, you would know it immediately. And it's the same way too. Later, I learned that, you know, like in Nashville, if you have to ask what to play, you probably don't belong there.
Right.
And I learned that really quick. The first time I worked with Brent Mason on that session, you know, we listened to the demo, we come out into the room, there's 2 guitar players, so who's going to do what? And it was kind of like, I watched him over there sort of looking at his guitars, and I made the fatal error of saying, what are you going to do? And he just looked at me and he says, I don't know. And so that was like, okay, you don't do that. If you have to ask, you don't belong there. And with John, it was a lot of that. Sometimes it'd be like, Dave, I need your best lick. Give me your best lick. Yeah, you know, what you just got to interpret. What does that mean? Like, what mood is he in today? You know, what key are we in? That was a period of time where I had not really gotten to the point where I was really thinking 3 or 4 parts ahead, and baritone guitars, and I mean, I was still, no, actually, I did a lot of capo stuff in open tunings then. Not as much as I did later in Nashville, but that was kind of what that kind of got me going in that direction. But I mean, like, there's a song on the Human Wheels record, the first song on the record, called When Jesus Left Birmingham. And it's a slamming track. I mean, just, you know, real aggressive slamming. We cut that song with acoustic guitar and bongos. and him sing. I shit you not. He goes, Dave, I need your best lick. And so, I mean, I played that little acoustic, down, 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 down. Well, I mean, I never said, is that cool or anything? I just played it, and that became the hook. And so Kenny on bongos, me on acoustic guitar, and John sang the song. And that was the vocal. And no click track, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, go. And we did it maybe 2 times. Sounds good to me. And then from there, we added in a drum kit, and you know, I played this kind of like real aggressive single coil stratty kind of part. And I can remember John was going through this phase where he was just bored, and Malcolm Byrne was involved in the record too. So Malcolm was bringing all this cool stuff. Malcolm worked with Daniel Lanois, was a big part of Daniel's productions, and he was bringing a lot of cool sounds, and John was kind of just going through this phase. And I just remember him, before I cut that electric part, I was cutting through a Neve module, and he just kind of walked over and took the high end thing, went, and he was like, cussing, like, do something, like make it sound like something. And, you can just hear the preamp overloading, and added, mandolin, fiddle, all these cool background vocals, a great bass part. So listen to that song just think about acoustic guitar and bongos. That's how that song was, in the final vocal.
Yeah. What about like, he had kind of a specific way of doing things, of directing you, that maybe was a little outside of the norm, as you mentioned. It's like being a football coach. Did you have like a giant rig of like palettes to choose from for this stuff, or was it pretty abbreviated? Like you said, you came into the gig with a telly and your PRS and a 50-watt Marshall head. Did it evolve much, or was it always pretty simple stuff like that?
It was bare bones. I might have had a tuner on the floor.
Right on.
But in all the touring I did with them, the only pedal I used was, I had a TC Electronics booster. Where I didn't use the distortion part. I just hit the front end of the amp a little harder for solos.
So no reverb, no delay.
No. And it was all Marshalls all the time. And that the Whenever We Wanted record was my first full record, and because I was sort of the new kid on the block, or the new toy, whatever you want to, it really became an electric guitar record. And it was the first time they'd taken, Kenny's massive drum sound was such a huge part of all those previous records, and they moved the drums into the smaller room that they normally use for guitar amps, and put the guitar amps out in the big room. And John was always just like, turn it up, like more. He wanted it to be super aggressive, and I think we caught that. It really, some really cool sounds and cool hooks. I just remember that being a really, really fun time.
Is there one particular like guitar part that you came up with when you were doing those records that stands out to you most, that you're like most proud of?
That's a tough question when everybody says the best or the most, or because there's so many intangibles involved in that question.
Sure.
There is Love and Happiness, the first song on the not the Al Green song, but John's song, Love and Happiness. It came in as a 3-chord folk song.
Yeah.
And it's got a real aggressive guitar hook in it. And I think I came up with it. And if I didn't come with it, I don't know who did, but it's in the chord progression is A minor to F. And I heard this thing in my head, and I kept trying to get it the way I wanted. And I ended up tuning the guitar to open G. So it's a G major chord.
Right.
And I'm playing A minor to F. And that opened me up to, oh man, I can use all these tunings to get things to sound unique in their own way. And actually, I mean, I keep a guitar sitting here tuned to open G. Just, I'll show you what I did if you want
Yeah,
me to.
yeah. I'd love to hear it. Let's do it.
So the song is, A minor to F. And the lick I was trying to play that I heard in my head was, and then, but to me that sounded like some Blue Oyster Cult song or something. I don't know. It wasn't what I was looking for. So let me grab this Les Paul Jr.
Yeah.
I love a junior tune to open tunings. If I can get my in-ear monitors to let me move this far back. So I actually used, this isn't the one, but it's actually the one that's on the cover. And so it's tuned to open G, and the pot in this needs to be sprayed. So I ended up playing so it's like way more aggressive, and I was able to, it's a, and then when it goes to the 5, the 4, that big ass D chord. And then the I think I listened to Spanish Castle Magic on the way to the studio today. You could play the song in standard tuning, but it doesn't sound like that.
Yeah.
And so, you asked me about hooks. I don't know. I mean, there were so many. His songs all had some sort of hook that was hopefully memorable. If it wasn't memorable, it didn't make the cut. But that one, I remember that because that was one of the first songs we cut. And just, again, the whole idea of being able to the sound of open tunings in situations where you might not normally think of using an open tuning.
Yeah.
It's just not the typical thing to play a song in A minor in an open G tuning.
Yeah. Well, having some of those strings that wouldn't ordinarily be ringing out unfretted, kind of create like this kind of groundswell,
Yeah, I mean, and I think that was cut Keith Richards, but I use it all the time. And then I got one, I keep one in open E, and an interesting thing too that is like a sort of comes into the tip heading. When I play an open A, I usually don't just capo. I tune the guitar all the way up to open A, and which gives it a really bright, cool, snappy, tight thing. And I've done. I mean, obviously it's the same intervals, so you have the same voicings and everything. But that, if you're at home try, if you're playing an open E or open A, a lot of guys will tune to open D and capo, or open G and then capo. It sounds totally different if you tune all the way up to get the tension on the strings.
Yeah. Do you use different string gauge when you're tuning up that much, or are you still using your standard, whatever you would normally use on your guitars?
I just tune it up.
What gauge strings do you use typically?
This guitar has 10.5s, and I've actually gone to those a lot more lately. Even on the PRSs, I was using 11s all the time. I'm coiled up in these in-ears that you have me wearing. 10 and a halves, so it's on most Fenders I'll play 10s.
Mm-hmm.
But on the PRSs, it just depends on the guitar. Some, it's that law of physics that no one can truly seem to figure out, why the same guitar with the same frets feels, 10s feel one way on it, and in the next guitar 10s feel different on that guitar. So I kind of like, it's a guitar by guitar basis, but Gibsons, anywhere from 10 to 11s, and PRSs 10.5s to 11. I don't think I have one PRS that has 10s on it, except the very first one for some reason sounds better with 10s. And that's another thing too. It's not just, you got to really listen to the guitar. Certain guitars resonate better with less tension.
Yeah.
Bigger is not always better, just like lighter guitars are not always better.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, gear wise, I mean, you were using PRSs. When did your signature PRS come into the fold? What year was that?
I think it was 08 or 07.
Okay.
But going back to 91, when I was still with John, I designed, special ordered a guitar with a bunch of different features than the standards that I was playing. The body was thick, had more mahogany on it. The neck shape was different. The tuners were different. The headstock angle was different. It was the first guitar PRS had ever made that had covers on the humbucking pickups, which I was convinced had something to do, affected the tone in some way or other. And Paul's like, no, it's not going to. And I don't care. Dwayne Allman and Jimmy Page had covers on their humbuckers. I want covers. And it turns out they do affect the tone. So I special ordered that guitar in 91, and I got it at NAMM in January of 92. And the exact guitar became the McCarty model. I was not ready I didn't think I really deserved having my name on a guitar at that point.
But there's no tremolo on it though at that time.
There was no tremolo. But then I had them make me one, 6 months later, the same guitar with tremolo. And I just got, their tremolo is to me, the best, most consistent tremolo that doesn't require, that stays in tune, and you can still get almost a Bigsby thing out of it, which is the only thing I use it for anyway. And it's still, to me, the best one out there. Short of if you get extremely lucky and get a guitar where the Bigsby stays in tune and right neck angle, so the strings don't have to go under the bar, they can just go over. So yeah, I became the McCarty with tremolo. We evolved into that, and then I started making tweaks to that, and it was, a whole lot of different things. Change the pickup. Let's do this. Let's put these tuners at the necks. Put bigger frets on it. Move the volume control to a different position. And by about 2006, we decided it was time to do a completely different model, because what I was playing was different than what they were selling.
Yeah, and I think it's, I don't need to tell you, but I think it's widely revered by most guitar players as probably the best sort of hybrid of being able to get great Strat tones and great Les Paul tones in one, just like ultimate workhorse guitar with the DGT. It's a great instrument.
Yeah, I've tried to quit it and I can't. But they're all different. Like every one of them is different. This one here is I play a lot, and it's from 2010, and I think the neck is Pernambuco, which is what they make violin bows out of.
Oh, nice.
And this is a guitar that 11s feel like 10s on,
Wow.
and there's no rational explanation for that. But this guitar really, to me, I mean, I've got a 59 335 behind me, and they're just as, you know, they're different, but they both have a thing and a soul to them that um, it's rare to find in a new guitar for me. And now, of course, this is Nitro, and it's 10 years old, and I've played it a lot, like a ton. Um, this particular one, this one, and you know, I've got several. I mean, I've got a lot of them, and some of them are just hard to get away from me. I mean, they really. So many times I sit here, and I mean, I'm working here. I've got about 20 amps and 30 guitars, and I'm always I mean, especially since quarantine, I'm in here all day doing guitar tracks for people, and there's so many times that you're looking for the sonic space, or you're trying, you know, you just can't get. I'm almost there with a certain guitar, and then I pick up this guitar, or you know, several of the other ones that I've got, and there it is. I mean, it it's not the same sound every time. For some reason, I'm able to get a variety of tones out of this guitar, and it seems to really respond to changes in the amp really well. Um, but the whole concept of, you know, working here as I'm working at home, I oftentimes get projects that are full. I mean, they just have so much stuff on them, and it becomes, you know, you can't put a Les Paul tuned down to C or C sharp, you know, and double that. It's just not, there's just not the room for it. So I'm always trying to carve out and find out which guitar, which guitar does the song want or need.
Yeah. So after you completed with Mellencamp, what was kind of the next big project that you got on?
Um, it wasn't for long, but it was, I spent 3 weeks filling in for Dickie Betts,
Oh, wow.
the Allman Brothers. And I was still technically in John's band, but the downside of John's band was that when we would tour, it was like pretty much the same notes every night. I had a couple of spots where I got to blow it out, but um, I didn't really realize it until I went out with the Almonds and got back into the wide open improvising thing again, that, I remember now.
Right.
This is it, man. This is why this is really, you know, the whole connecting with something, you know, in your heart that
Yeah.
um, had nothing to, it was just about music. There was nothing else involved. It was all about music. And so one thing led to, you know, a variety of things sort of transpired very quickly, and I left John's band, and then we formed the Storyville, the version of Storyville that made 2 records for Atlantic, and we toured for 5 years. So that adventure began.
Yeah, man. I think that's, you know, that band is so incredible. And I said to you in text, like, one of like my all-time epitome like tones that I hear in my head that I always like strive for is the What Passes for Love guitar tone. That's such an amazing guitar tone.
Which, the studio version or the live version?
The live version.
Live version.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's do you remember what you used for that?
I do. I used uh on that song, I remember, because I've seen it, said there's a video of it. So I used one of the PRS hollow body 2s,
Uh,
which is a super sleeper guitar. I
uh,
mean, I've still got it, and first of all, it weighs nothing, uh, but it doesn't sound wimpy, and uh, it's super cool guitar. But it was before the DGT had come out, and on that song, I think I was using that, I might have had the prototype for the DGT. I don't know, but I always carried two guitars.
Yeah.
And I think I played through a Bad Cat Panther, but the big game changer was I brought my old 412 that's in my guitar amp room here that I've used on everything I've done for the last 20 years.
Greenback speakers in that?
25s, yeah, greenback 25s, and it's got it's got a particle board back, which is supposedly not cool.
Yeah.
It just sounds, I've had 20 of them, and this one just sounds great. And when I did my first solo record, I blew one of the speakers in it. So I thought, in the past when that's happened and I'd got that speaker reconed, it messed up the entire cabinet. And I'd had great cabinets before, and when I blew a speaker and got it reconed, I don't know what happens but it never sounded the same. This one, a guy here in town, Ron Condon, Austin Speaker Works, reconed that speaker, and it's now the speaker I mic all the time. So for some reason, it's like the cabinet is just like meant. That's when I took that Bad Cat amp and played it through a 212 with vintage 30s in it, and then moved it to this cabinet, it was game over. That has
This is the Mark Sampson era Bad Cat, right?
No, maybe barely, but I think he was gone by the Panther. Okay. And the Panther was the one amp they made that I really got along with. It was a lower gain. You could really get the Malcolm Young, not so overdriven, bell-like warm rhythm sound out of, and build on that.
Were there any pedals that you were using or was it all amp distortion?
No, I was using pedals at that point. I think I had a Klon. I was like, I had 3 Klons at one point.
You were early to the party then.
I know I had like the first one in Austin. It was like, I think he gave it to me. The first one, there's this new guy making pedals. He sent one down for you if you want to try it. And I plugged it in. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
I can deal with that. Because that kind of maybe got me on the pedal train, no pun intended. Well, actually, when we made that live record, it was after I started using pedals. I started really using pedals when I started doing sessions in Nashville, which was around 2000.
Yeah.
And we made the live record. I had a pedal board before that, because in Storyville, I'm thinking back, I did have a pedal board, and I remember using the Klon and a full drive 2 and a full tone fat boost.
Uh-huh.
But Bob Bradshaw put together a board for me, and it had one of his tremolos on it, which was like this, the size of a small pedal board.
Yeah.
And weighed about 15 pounds.
Yeah.
And he turned me on to the Arion chorus.
Yeah.
And it really has never left my board since. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's just a really cool, unique pedal. And I literally, like, he goes, you can find them on eBay for $25. And I literally got one on eBay for $25. And I'm like, okay, I dig that. Because I'd used a TC Electronics chorus flanger to try to get the Leslie thing.
Yeah. It doesn't go fast enough though for that.
It works. It sounds great, but I broke them constantly.
Oh, did you?
They were always breaking. If you look at my TC booster, I always wore boots when I played then. I still kind of do, but it's the metal housing. If I could dig it out and find it, you would laugh. It's thick metal, and the whole front of the pedal is literally worn away, and it's like a 45-degree angle. Stepping on it and like literally standing on and everything. So the chorus flanger did not hold up as well as the booster.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Storyville thing, you did that I mean, when was the last record that you put out with Storyville?
I think we played our last official gig in sometime in 2000. We did 2 records for Atlantic.
Yeah.
And there was a record before that that I played on too, but the band with Chris Slayton and Tommy Shannon and David Holt and myself backing up Malford, that started in '95, and we had about a 5-year run.
Yeah. And then what was the next kind of thing that you did after that, would you say?
I started really going to Nashville a lot and
Yeah.
doing a lot of sessions. That's when my session thing became sort of my main gig.
Yeah, I mean, like looking at the credits, like Trisha Yearwood and Dixie Chicks and like all sorts of just like, royalty.
Yeah, it was God, it was a fun time. I mean, the players in Nashville are so good. It was awesome. I miss that a lot. I miss the camaraderie and being in the room, and then, by the second or third take, you've got the track. I miss all that. And so when I got there was definitely an element of, the sounds of some of the records were really influenced, I think, by John's records. And so I sort of had the good fortune of having played with John. And I also grew up listening to a lot of, legitimate country music. My dad was really into Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash. And George Jones, all that stuff was part of my DNA, as was some bluegrass. Growing up in Kentucky, sort of a country music cousin there. But I was able to sort of bring what I do and fit into their system. And I learned a lot. I mean, the first big session I did there went really well. And then it was just like, who is this guy? Get me that guy. And I need and then it was, eventually it's like, I need a younger version of him. But for about 10 years, I was really, really fortunate to go back and forth a couple times a month and make records there. And I also had a songwriting publishing deal there and wrote a lot of stuff that I wrote with a lot of great writers and learned a ton from. When Chris Stapleton moved to town, we wrote together. We wrote about 10 songs together, and had some songs cut by Trisha Yearwood, Leanne Womack, and country artist Montgomery Gentry. So it was really neat to be able to be a part of that community as a player and a songwriter. But it was the getting in the room with those cats, all of which they're all total badasses, and I had to up my game in a hurry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of cool to reminisce some of these moments, because I've always been a huge fan of yours, and although any of us can go and see your list of credits, sometimes it's difficult to connect the dots and kind of see how you got from A to Z on a lot of this stuff, because man, it's I revere the work that you've done, the tones that you've got. But I want to talk to you now about gear pieces that you feel like are sort of your David Grissom's recommended pieces of gear that you feel like have, transcended time. I want to take you through a couple of different genres of pedals.
Okay.
From boost and compressors and overdrive and fuzz and stuff like that. And just tell me kind of some of your favorites or ones that you like. And then maybe we can get into a couple of pieces of sleeper gear, or you can sort of pepper those in on a category by category basis. if there are any that you can think of. So I'll start kind of at the beginning of the chain. Compressors. Do you have any compressors that you like or that you use, whether they're on your board or in the studio or things like that?
I do. I hate compressors, but I do like, I'm staring at right now, the Origin Effects Cali, I can't read it, the Compact Deluxe, the Cali 76.
Yep.
It, it's one of those pedals that when you turn it on, it does something, but you don't know. I mean, you wouldn't know it's a compressor. I mean, you can make it do a compressor thing, but it just does something, especially with single coil pickups,
Yeah.
in terms of fattening them up without doing the grab. I play so aggressively that a Dynacomp or even the Blue Boss compressor is just like, you just hear it grab.
Yeah.
Brent Mason, he's like barely touches the strings, so the compressor's on all the time, and he works with the compressor. Me, I'm a bull in the china shop. So that compressor, and then the Exotic SP is okay, is pretty cool too. You can for me, it's just being able to get rid of have the settings low enough to where I don't hear compression.
Yeah. What about boost pedals?
Well, my mainstay has been the Exotic EP booster. I think I have number 0005.
Oh, wow.
And about 4 other ones since then. The trick for me is to go inside the pedal and put it in the vintage mode. I don't know what they call it now, but back then it was vintage mode. And what that sort of, the pedal inherently has a little more top when you turn it on.
Yeah.
Theoretically, I guess like an Echoplex preamp,
Right.
where you get brighter. But that pedal in vintage mode, again, it's another one of those pedals that it just does something a little different than your typical neutral boost. I mean, so that one, and then I don't know if it qualifies as a boost or not, but the steel string, your pedal, the steel string is on my board. I'm staring at it. It's dark down there. That's the correct name, right?
Yeah, you got it.
I like that pedal a lot, and to me, that's sort of somewhere between. It can be a boost pedal, or it can be just barely overdriven pedal.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of what I look for, if I'm not going for a like real exaggerated fuzz effect or like a real extreme effect, is something that maintains the integrity of because I set my amp up, basically, that's just the way I want my guitar to sound, and pedals just enhance that.
Yeah.
That's another one of those pedals that straddles the line between boost and overdrive, and it's a great thing. And it has a filter where I can, like, I'm always running from top end,
Yeah.
and that filter's in a really nice spot, so I can dial it back just a touch, and any spikiness is gone. But I've had a lot of engineers opt for that, or producers opt for that pedal as the overdrive of choice at times.
Oh, I'll take it. The check's in the mail, as I say.
No, I wouldn't. I don't. I'm not here to sell stuff.
Just teasing you. No, I've always appreciated the kind words. I saw the first time I saw it on the board. I mean, I know that we had obviously, we had coordinated so that we could send one to you. But the first time I actually saw it in use was when you were doing that interview at True Tone in their lounge. And you talked about it, and I really appreciated that. I was so glad that it was something that ended up connecting with you.
Yeah, I really want to try. I want to do I've just gotten hip to the expression pedal in the boost.
Oh yeah, do you have one of the boosts?
I have the boost, and I find it to be pretty neutral, which is what most people want in a boost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I mean, the whole idea of, I don't really hear the tuner out thing as much as some people do. I guess I'm just sort of like, well, if it takes a little bit away, just crank the amp another little notch, or the treble another little notch. But, I've seen a couple of guys now talk about the virtues of that volume pedal approach. And I don't use a volume pedal except in the studio, but I could see the advantage of having a boost you get a lot of bang for your buck, and then you can keep the volume pedal off the board
Yeah.
for when you need it. And it just volume pedals take up so much space.
Yeah.
So that I'm headed that direction. I'm going to try it. I just need to get the right cable. It's a tip ring sleeve, right?
Yeah, you just have an insert cable. I'll send you a link to one. Like Hosa makes one that's like $4.
Because I've got the Dunlop volume pedal, which also functions as an expression pedal, I believe.
Yeah, and it'll just depend. So the boost won't resolve the taper of it, and sometimes the expression taper, since it's typically for digital effects, it'll typically be linear instead of an audio taper. So it'll be a little bit it'll be a little bit faster on how it responds throughout the throw. So some people won't like the 10K expression taper, and you could do it either way. You could go expression to expression with TRS, or you could use an insert cable, which basically takes the TRS and makes it into two monos, and then you can just go into the input and output of any volume pedal.
Huh.
So there's two different ways you can do it. I'll walk you through it before we complete, so you can see all the different ways.
The limit of my technical ability right there.
But anytime there's three letters together, if there's TRS or XLR, that's like MIDI's one letter too many.
Yeah, I just realized there's a TRRS or TRSS. I don't know. I think it's TRRS. This whole, since we're all streaming now, getting in and out of my interface and trying to have decent audio, I've discovered that there's an adapter to, if you want to record into your iPhone, off the interface, you need a TRRS. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know about this.
Play audio, and it's just like, it looks like TRS with an extra ring.
Okay. Wow.
A mini plug.
Okay, yeah. Like an 1/8 inch.
It's that to the lightning connector adapter.
Okay. I just figured out something the other day that I didn't know, where if you have I only have the Apollo Twin, just the 2-channel one.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that if you use one of the optical light cables, that you can actually put in another 8 channels into your Apollo Twin. If you have a mic pre that has the kind of like an ADAT optical out. Didn't know that. So you can get 8 channels plus the 2 already in you can get 10 channels out of your Apollo Twin. How about that?
Well, I have an Apollo 8, and I also have an aux.
Yeah.
The amp top.
Yeah, I have one of this.
And I use SPDIF to get in with that. That's not optical. That's SPDIF. That's different. But for some reason, I've had no trouble getting the audio out of the Apollo into Zoom, and apparently a lot of guys are like it doesn't work for them, and it's like if I can figure it out, maybe there's something about the way my setup is that makes it a little more copacetic to that. But
I just select Thunderbolt input on the audio, and it's there.
Right.
Yeah, super easy. What about overdrive pedals? What are you digging these days?
Jetter. The Jetter makes a pedal with my name on it. I like that pedal a lot. What else? I've been using this Telos pedal, the Psionic Audio Telos, for a long time.
Yeah.
It's more of a tube screamery kind of mid focused overdrive. It's got a great buffer in it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really like having a buffer at the beginning and the end of my chain. I don't like any more buffers than that. It has a really high quality buffer. I watched your thing on buffers, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And for about that night I went to bed, I was wondering, do I have a 1K buffer or whatever you said? You gotta have.
Yeah, the impedance. Yeah.
God, I hope I have the right buffer. I mean, I was fine until I saw your thing, but
how long ago did you watch that, and how long has it been haunting you?
I don't Oh, it hadn't been really haunting me, but so um, after all these years, I still am learning that you need to plug the cord into the guitar,
Yeah.
and then the volume is another issue. So the telos I use some, if I'm doing some thicker stuff down low. That's what I use that for, is it doesn't have a lot of low end.
Yeah.
I'm playing low notes and clusters, and can be like totally muddy with certain other, that just doesn't articulate as well on, big, thick, low notes. So that's the jetter. It's hard for me to tell exactly what's going on with the in-ear monitors, but those are the two on this board.
Can you compare how you would use those versus the steel string sonically?
Yeah, I would use the steel string like I would the EP booster, in a very similar fashion, in that I'm not looking to, radically change the sound, because I'm not one of the super clean guys. I don't have that really, the Michael Thompson,
Yeah.
No
harmonizer on your guitar.
First of all, he does it better than I could ever do it, and he's incredible. But I don't do that thing. I mean, my idea of cleaning up is to go to like a Strat or a Tele and then kind of not touch the amp. So the steel string and the EP booster would be just like the next step up from where the amp is. Like if I play the amp really hard, it's going to crunch. It's already crunching. I mean, if I turn it down, it cleans up. So, having a dynamic, really interactive amp helps. But the steel string, it would be here. It's fatter, and it hits the front end of the amp a little more without the bottom end being flubby. Hear the difference? It's not like, it's still the same tone. It's just like I turn my guitar up, and then, on the old stereos when you had the loudness button, do you remember?
I have one on my turntable.
A Marantz receiver has a loudness, or Sansui, they have loudness things where just more of everything in a good way.
Yeah.
Without mudding it up. So that's how I would use that pedal. The jetter is more if I'm definitely just want to keep the bottom end but thicken it up even more. And then the telos is if I want to get into Tube Screamer world, and it's tricky for me to have the amp kind of, this amp is a 30-watt amp, and I have the master on 10, and so it's like the outputs, it's really all the output stages, which is, to me, is where the sweet stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's great for me because it's still loud, and it's got enough pushback where the compression doesn't make it go away, but it's not like taking like a 50-watt Marshall, an old 50-watt Marshall, or old 100-watt Marshall, or a high watt, and then when you hit it with a really mid-rangey overdrive pedal, it doesn't fold down at all. I mean, it's just a different. You kind of have to. It's a two-way street. It's not just about different pedals work a little better in different types of amplifiers and different settings. So, you know, everybody has to find what their touch is, and what works for me is not going to work for everybody else, and vice versa. It's just an individual preference. But
Sure.
I like to have, this is my studio board, so I would rarely have less than 3 overdrives, and they're varying degrees of overdrive. And then the compressor, actually maybe even be the first. Here's without it. It just adds a little pillowy thing to it in a good way, and it's it's kind of unity gain, actually. It sounds a little louder, but it's not. If that makes sense, I don't know if that's possible, but I've looked at it on the meter.
Yeah.
I could use the volume control to hit the amp harder, and that would be a slight variation on these other pedals too. But especially in the studio, it depends on the guitar, the amp, the key, the song. Are you using a capo? Which producer are you working for? Which preamp? Which mic? On any given day, I'm gonna, one's gonna work better than the other, and it might be song to song. But am I talking too long about that subject?
No. This is good. This is good. You know, we want all your secrets.
Yeah, and the other. Okay, I'll let you drive. I was going to get into other stuff on my board, but
please do. I mean, I'm sure that people want to know, and invariably I'll end up asking you probably all the categories of pedals that those are going to fall. And the next one I was going to ask you about was modulation. You kind of talked about the Arion a little bit already.
The Arion, okay, the Arion I like a lot. And at NAMM, I got a Revival Drive bias tremolo.
Mm-hmm.
So for bias tremolo, that, again, like their compressor, I think they make really high quality stuff. It's a kind of a big beefy pedal, but it does something really cool. It's sort of the Brown tremolo, the Brown Fender tremolo.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. I got a multi-effects box here. that I'm gonna talk about for a long time. So
all right. So the M9, right?
Comes under a secret weapon too, because I've used this pedal since the day it was released, and I actually know. I mean, I've actually had people in Nashville when I first started going there that were doing me a favor, like, man, if you want to make it here, get that Line 6 shit off your board. About 3 years later, everybody had an M9 on their board, not because of me, but it was like people realized that, man, this pedal is ridiculous. You've got to have the switches redone.
Yeah.
I showed up for a Buddy Guy record, and the airlines dropped it, and I had one sound. You can only get one sound at a time. I mean, like, my whole board was kind of built around 6 sounds on there in the M9 at a time. Yeah. Modulation. The best pitch vibrato, except maybe an Original Boss VB2.
Yeah.
I've tried them all. Unless you had a magnetone in stereo, I use that all the time. And you know, like with a watery delay thing. I could just listen to the decay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then also in the M9 is the Opto Tremolo. I use it all the time, and I have these super analog engineers. They've got like Pultecs and Telefunken stuff stacked to the ceiling, and they see the M9, they're going, oh no. And then they hear the tremolo, and they're like, that's coming out of that pedal? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I've used it on Buddy Guy records. I mean, everything. And then when we get to the delay part of your question, I'll talk about that too. But it's also got, I've just now discovered the spring reverb that sounds. Turn the delay off. I would turn the mix back a little bit. Anyway, it's got some good reverbs in it too. It's like, so I got the new, here goes my Line 6 endorsement on the toilet. I've got the HX Effects box because it's, you know, the new improved version of the M9.
Yeah.
Sounds digital. This sounds analog.
Yeah.
Relatively to me, just to me. And I, you know, and I'm not smart enough I wasn't smart enough to figure it out either. So I came back to this. I mean, the delays and the modulation stuff, especially in the M9, my kind of my secret sleeper.
Yeah, yeah. I had a conversation about a week or two ago with Derek Wells, a session musician over in Nashville.
Great player.
And he was talking about, you know, how, you know, he shows up to these sessions and Dan Huff sees his M9 on there. He says the same thing. Like, oh no, you're gonna use that thing. And you know, he hasn't changed the switches on his. He said his are totally stock. He just has like 3 of them waiting in the wings, you know, just in case.
You know, it costs us a guy, Jack, what's his name? Jack
Vaughn, yeah.
He does it. It's like $90. And
so I looked into it, and he's now discontinued it because I guess that there's so many service related issues that like people are holding him responsible for that are actually just like design problems in the Line 6, you know. So it's like one of the dangers of modding, whereas if like the platform is unstable for mods, people come back to you as the mod guy and they say, oh, my Line 6 M9 doesn't work, it's your fault because you modified the switches, even though it has nothing to do with the switch mods or anything like that he did. It's just like, you know, it was a sort of a budget thing. So I looked on his website because I went and bought one right after I got out in the conversation with Derek. Some guy had one on Craigslist, and so that was brand new, and I went and bought it for $150, you know. And so I have it here, and I just changed the switches on mine. But I was curious about, you know, Jack's services because I was gonna, you know, do a video about, you know, how great this thing sounds for the money and show how to do the switch mod, which is really actually very simple to do on your own, even if you have very basic.
I've got 2 more that I'll send to you.
Yeah.
I have 3 of them. You know, he also offered this audio upgrade thing.
Yeah.
So you can get your top end back and this, that. And I'm like, I'm not losing any top end. I don't want more top end. And I opted not to get that done. So I don't know. I can't vouch for that. All I did was,
I think he built like a new buffer circuit on the output section. It also loses a little bit of gain on the right output, I think, if you're not, or the left output if you're not using it in stereo. But if you're using it, yeah. Are you using it in mono or stereo though?
Mono.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there's a certain point they corrected it. You know, for the one that I have here, I just went and, you know, I had some momentary switches just, you know, hanging around just for repairs and stuff like that on pedal boards. And so I just used my remaining stock. You know, it would probably take me a year normally to go through 9 momentary switches, but I used them all on my M9 that I got there just to make it more reliable. But yeah, I mean, it sounds really good. And there's nothing, I can't say anything bad about it.
The delays are killer. I mean, you want to talk delays now?
Yeah, let's talk delays. Go for it.
So the Strymon El Capistan is, to me, the most analog-y, juicy. I have it on my other 2 boards. I don't have it on this board. It's awesome. I love the El Capistan. I'd like to try the Brigadier. I haven't yet.
Yeah.
I just got this, and I
Right.
love the sound of it, man. But the mix control is unusable. I mean, if you like breathe, that's all it wants to be on, or I have too much delay.
Yeah.
I think it can be fixed with a computer.
Probably. I mean, I haven't heard of this problem, so maybe there's something going on with it.
I mean, it's just, and this is a common thing, that a question I get from players, that um, it's about their delay issues.
Yeah.
People have delay issues, and I get a lot of questions about, like, how do you, they can't, there's just like sort of this pervasive feeling that to get your delays not to be muddy, you must have an effects loop or something like that. And it's just, to me, it's a real simple thing. Just turn the mix knob down.
Yeah.
And I play so hard that, it's a common thing for me to have the mix really low on delays, and on overdrives to have the gain really low and turn up the output. That's another thing that is really, really helpful. If you have an overdrive that you feel is too gainy, or maybe seems too soft, or too buzzy, or whatever the adjectives are that we don't necessarily look for, try turning the volume on the overdrive up a lot, and then bring the gain in. And that's a big part of the idea for me about maintaining the integrity of the tone, where the bottom end doesn't get too woofy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're also relying a lot more on your amplifier preamp, which presumably is the tone that the overdrive's trying to get in the first place, is simulating a
Right.
12AX7 that's getting hit hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the kiss of death to take use it like an amp with the master volume. If you do that, you're just choking back the pedal.
Yeah.
And the gain on 8 and the volume, the level, or whatever they call it on the pedal, on 2, it's just not going to sound. It's just like taking a master volume amp and turning the master down to 2 and the preamp up to 8. It's
Yeah.
not the same thing.
Yeah, well, I've tried to explain this to people who hate tube screamers, because a lot of people hear Stevie Ray Vaughan, and when they go to play at their house, the only way they can get the amount of gain that you perceive in a Stevie Ray Vaughan song is by cranking the gain. But if you look at any of Stevie Ray Vaughan's settings on any of the pedalboard photos, the gain's almost off, and the volume's cranked and the tone is cranked. And he's really using it to hit the front of his vibroverb or his super reverb or his Dumble, which is like a really scooped amp, and he's kind of using it to take some of the flubbiness and tubbiness out and hit the front end on there. He's not limiting the bandwidth by cranking the gain, and people who want that tone, they don't want to turn their amp up loud, and so they're trying to compensate with the gain, and it just makes the sound actually smaller, and really boxy.
It does.
Yeah.
Does. And so that's kind of the first. I can usually tell with an overdrive pedal pretty quick whether I'm going to bond with it or not. And that's, yeah, I mean, but that's a big, those two concepts of, on your delays, turning your mix maybe lower than you think you want it, and on the overdrive, turning the gain down and the output up. Both those things, to me, really help improve your tone.
That's a good point, because I think a lot of guys really do feel like they can only use amps with effects loops, for that reason. And I mean, certainly you're getting some gain from your amp, without pedals, already.
There's gain on the amp. I mean, it's a touch sensitive gain. Just by turning down to 7 and playing lighter, it cleans up a lot. But where were we going with that we were talking about? Pedal.
Yeah, we were just talking about, that you already have some gain on the amp. A lot of guys feel like if they have any amp gain, then automatically they need to go to an effects loop, and they need to insert between the preamp and power amp.
So since 1998, I've never seen a fellow session player use an effects loop. Not one time, ever. not ever, you know, so that's worth something in terms of knowledge. I mean, I did some sessions when I first got to Austin in, God, 84 or something. Roscoe Beck brought me out to LA, and I ended up on a session with Mike Landau. And that was in the height of the Bradshaw
Right.
rig thing. And I was just like this hillbilly with a gym bag full of, you know, like I got a chorus.
Yeah.
I got, I got a chorus, man.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds just like, you know, I don't know what it was. I was like so green. It was funny. But since, like, you know, for the last 20 years, I've never seen another session player use an effects loop.
Well, technically, they weren't even using effects loops. They were, using, stuff that was supposed to be in a mix bus that was coming after, basically inserting it between, or after between the speaker and the mic, because a lot of those old wet dry amps or rigs, they were miking the dry amp, bringing it into a mic pre in the rack, and then feeding all the line level gear and using it just like you would in a studio where they mix the wet in parallel with the dry sound.
It's glorious on its own, but I mean, you know, in Nashville, they call it big mono. You know, it just takes up all the room in the track. And if you're making a solo record, or if you really know what you're doing, you can get away with it. But most of the time, it's sort of a vanity thing to make it sound like it's swimming around you in the room.
Yeah.
And,
you ever heard Dan Huff's Giant records?
yeah, I mean, what a player. I mean,
he was a fan of the chorus.
Yeah. A lot of chorus fans.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. The tri-stereo chorus was the thing. You weren't a pro unless you had a Dyno My Piano tri-stereo chorus.
I know. I never made it to that level.
Yeah, there's still time.
I had the original Boss Chorus Ensemble and I used 2 amps with it, and that was when I got that, I was like, oh my God, I'm just standing right in the middle of this and it feels good, you know. But
yeah.
What a crazy pedal when that thing first came out.
Oh man, they're incredible. I've been looking forever for one of the Paul Rivera modified ones, because he used to modify all the LA guys one, so the impedance was more appropriate for a guitar, and with some of you put a level control on it so you could adjust how much output it had and stuff like that. But the last one I saw on Reverb was like $2,000 or something like that. It's crazy for a chorus,
Yeah.
So I've abstained so far, but maybe one day or maybe I convince Paul to do it.
I'm not a chorus guy. I mean, kicking and screaming, I'll dial one up on occasion, but I'm allergic. I must be allergic to it. I don't know. There was a time and place for that, but I cannot get with it. Right. It's just not my thing.
Well, we'll get you on flanger first. That'll be the gateway.
I don't even like univibes. I don't like, playing through a univibe takes away my, I can't do my thing with it. I don't know. It's just like I become somebody else.
Yeah. What about reverbs? Are you pretty much just using everything in the M9 at that point, or do you use any other stuff on the board?
No, I don't use, I just sort of now discovered that the M9 has an acceptable reverb in it, but I'll use the amp, or the best reverb for me of all time is the Fender outboard tank from the 60s.
Yep.
That was my whole thing with Ely, was the 100-watt Marshall and 412 in a Fender reverb tank.
We're using the brown or the blackface ones?
Both.
Yeah.
The brown one I had just sort of gave up the ghost. I mean, it just became, it probably if you had gone through it and checked the values on everything, we could have brought it back, but it just kind of got a little bit gnarly. Yeah. The black one, I have an anvil case for it and everything. It went everywhere with me. When I showed up on the curb in 1993 at Dulles Airport, when the Allman Brothers tour bus picked me up, and I had my reverb tank and an anvil case and a PRS. And that's how attached I was to it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, they're great. I just got like a late blackface one. I think it's like from '67 maybe. And so it's got the kind of like the silver face
Oh yeah,
looking panel on it,
yeah.
and it still sounds great. It was just kind of what
Same
was
thing.
around. Yeah. Any sleeper pieces of gear that we haven't already covered that you think like people are overlooking that other than the M9 and the Arion chorus?
Um,
This could be amps, guitars,
okay,
that
I forgot. I also like. I just got the Vimaram. Is that how you say it?
Mhm.
Vimaram. Vimaram. Shanks overdrive pedal. I like that pedal a lot. That's a cool pedal. Um, and that's on one of my other boards. The Arion, the M9. As far as we could talk about a couple things for recording.
Okay.
Um, and speakers.
Okay.
Speakers are a big deal for me. Um, there's a real issue now with consistency for me. Like you could take a palette of vintage 30s and 5 mounts might sound incredible, and 15 sound terrible. I'm just going through speaker after speaker after speaker. So I've kind of landed on the reissue of the 65s. I like those a lot.
Yeah, the G1265 slush.
But for recording, people think, you've got to spend thousands of dollars to get, there's like a 57 and a Royer. Those are kind of the two standard guitar
Yeah.
miking things. But then I use this mic a lot. This is a U67,
Yep.
which people think, oh my God, I bought this in 2003. They're about 3 times as expensive now. But if you look at all the Hendrix stuff, Eddie Kramer was putting these on his right up on the cabinets. It's glorious on guitar. But there's a mic, the Beyer M160. I think they're up to almost $700 right now. But man, I'm telling you, to use one microphone, that is a secret weapon for me. I use it all the time, and it's still in the realm of something affordable. The two mic thing, if you have to have them perfectly in phase or it becomes an issue, it's still the Royer 57 thing is still killer. But the M160, and then I got these Siemens Pre's. They're V276As that Paul Reed Smith told me about. These are just V276. And every track I've cut at my house has been through these things. And I've got the Tube V76. This is the first generation Class A Pre's that Siemens did right after they quit making the tube ones. The tube ones were the sort of the Beatles era. But these solid state ones, they're hard to find anymore. I don't even know if you can find them. But man, they're not Neve, they're not API. There's something completely unique, and they just roll. They've got this top end roll off, which I love for guitar. I don't like that hard,
Yeah.
ice picky thing. So that mic, those Pre's, 412 cabinet. I don't know, man. It's the usual suspects beyond
Yeah.
that. Really.
Yeah. Well, I got
Practice. That's my secret one.
the sleeper pedal is practice.
I don't
Yeah.
do it practicing.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you the mic that I've been telling everybody about that's a total sleeper that people are not hip to, and this guitarist that does a lot of scoring stuff. His name is Snuffy Walden.
Mm-hmm.
Turned me on to it, and it's the Blue Encore 100i, and it is a $99 microphone, and I swear it is the Desert Island kind of 57 Royer combo in one microphone. It really gets close to that in one mic, and it's $99. Blue Encore 100i. I will set you up with their AR guy if you're interested.
That's interesting. I mean, I love hearing that. I've got a Blue Dragonfly that I use a lot on electric guitar.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. I kind of get lazy whatever's set up is sort of what I use.
Right.
That's all over my solo records, but
Okay.
it's not $99.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, man, we went, Snuffy has like an endorsement with Blue,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got an amazing studio in LA where he does all of, all the television shows that he works on, and he just kind of like went through all the different mics, like all the classics, and we were listening to the same cabinet recorded with that mic and the Royer and the 57. And I mean, the Royer 57 was certainly more dialable because you had, you were able to control each of them individually. But as far as a blended sound versus a blend, a single mic that's kind of emulates that blended sound in a way, it was like, pretty damn close. And it just was just a great sounding mic. So it's an impressive one for the price point. It's unbeatable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing too at studios. When you see an engineer put this like something on your amp that sucks, it's like there's no way it's going to sound good today. It's like I hate starting my day that way, but you just stay out of their turf. Play
yeah,
play better. Don't blame it on the tools.
yeah. How do you play around a vintage 30 in an SM57? That's the challenge. It's like upper mid on upper mid. You have
Yeah, I don't. You're right. You're right. And especially if you talk about stacking tracks with those, just the same that mic and that speaker all day long. Oh my God!
everybody's like, man, Dave was really into 2K these days.
Yeah,
Everything. No, his favorite frequency is 2K. It comes to
yeah.
guitar. Wow. Well, Dave, I think we went through everything. We talked about sort of the evolution of your career. We talked about some of the hits, the gear, your recommendations, the sleeper pedals, and studio gear. I supremely appreciate you making the time again. And you've only had 2 days off, and you've used an hour and 35 minutes here to indulge my questions. So I really appreciate that, and I also really appreciate that you use some of our stuff and that it works for the sound that you go for. So thank you for all of that today.
Oh man, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Always good to see you.
All right, see you later.
Adios.